People often say a woman's happiness or misery depends on her husband, but I think differently. A woman's happiness or misery lies in her ability to let go of what doesn't belong to her. I stood hesitatingly at the entrance of the prestigious Park Avenue Women's Pavilion in New York, clutching the sonogram report in my hand, already wrinkled from the sweat of my palm. Despite my nerves, a strange warmth was rising from deep within me, spreading through my entire body. The doctor had just pointed to a blurry black and white screen to tell me with a jubilant voice that congratulations were in order, Mrs. Sinclair. It was a twin pregnancy. Both fetal hearts were beating very strongly. 2 little souls were growing inside of me. It was the result of 3 agonizing years of waiting, and also the result of that fateful, drunken night. I gently caressed my belly, smiling as I whispered that Mommy's treasures, you've finally arrived. I took a cab back to the estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, the place I had called home for the past 3 years, but where I had never felt any warmth. A light drizzle began to fall. The raindrops hit the car window, cold and sharp, like a premonition of an impending storm. As I stepped out of the cab, the smile vanished from my lips, replaced by a paralyzing stupor. My old gray suitcase, the only thing I had brought with me when I married into this opulent family, lay abandoned in the middle of the rain-soaked flagstone courtyard. My clothes and books were scattered everywhere. Some of my white dresses, stained with mud, made for a pathetic sight. Before I could react, the heavy oak door swung open. Beatrice, my mother-in-law, stood there with a glacial expression. Her sharp eyes looked at me as if I were a piece of trash to be disposed of. Without a word, she threw a sheaf of papers at my face. The white pages fluttered erratically before landing in a puddle at my feet. I bent down to pick them up. The bolded phrase that hit my eyes made me let out a bitter laugh. Diagnosis: polycystic ovary syndrome, low ovarian reserve. Possibility of conception, nil. Beatrice lifted her chin and said to look at it closely, that the doctor had confirmed it. I was a fruitless tree. The Sinclair family had 3 generations of only sons. They couldn't let their bloodline end with me. I looked up at her, about to open my mouth to explain about the sonogram report burning in my purse, but I stopped. James was sitting in the living room. He occupied a priceless designer sofa, holding a glass of Napa Cabernet that he swirled gently. His posture was one of cruel calm. Seeing me, he didn't even bother to stand. He simply set the glass on the table and spoke in a voice that carried to me a tone as serene as if he were discussing the weather. "Eleanor," he said, "Mom is right. Let's end this." I walked into the house, not caring about my soaked clothes, and looked directly at the man I had loved with my entire being for the last 3 years. James still had the sophisticated air of a major CEO, but the look he gave me now held only weariness and annoyance. He pushed an exclusive black bank card and a divorce agreement, already signed with his name, toward me. He said that Sophia was back in the States and she needed a certain status. He told me there were $5 million on the card. To consider it compensation for 3 years of my youth. Take it and sign the papers. Don't make this any more difficult for us, Sophia. That name was like a knife to my heart. His high school sweetheart, the woman he had never forgotten despite being married to me. It turned out the reason I was being kicked out wasn't just that fake medical report, but because the true owner of his heart had returned. Beatrice, at his side, added a venom-laced sentence. For him to give you $5 million is more than generous for a useless daughter-in-law like you. Take the money and get out of my sight. Don't let Sophia see you here and get upset. I looked at the card lying inert on the glass table, and then I glanced down at my belly. If this had been the Eleanor of yesterday, I probably would have fallen to my knees crying, begging them not to throw me out, or I would have screamed, defending myself against the injustice that I wasn't sterile. But now, feeling the presence of the little lives stirring in my subconscious, everything suddenly seemed ridiculous. A husband who had been emotionally unfaithful for years, a cruel mother-in-law who would forge medical reports, were they worth holding on to? If I told them about my pregnancy, what would they do? Take my children and kick me out? Or force me to share my husband with that other woman? No, I couldn't let my children grow up in an environment of coldness and conflict. $5 million. For them, that figure was just a separation fee. But for my children and me, at this moment, it was a lifeline, the capital to start a new life. I took a deep breath, swallowing my tears, and lifted my head to look at James. Instead of the devastated expression they expected, I gave a smile so radiant it made him frown in surprise. I took the card and slipped it into my purse, right next to the twin sonogram report. I sent a text to my best friend. My fingers flew across the keyboard as my heart felt strangely light. I just hit the lottery. I'm free. Turning back to James, I pronounced each word clearly. I said, "All right, I accept the divorce. The money is on the table. Thank you for your generosity. I'll see you at the courthouse tomorrow." With that, I turned and walked out of that house without a single backward glance, leaving the astonishment of mother and son behind the cold door of that mansion. The next morning, the New York sky was incredibly clear after the previous night's downpour, exactly like my mood. I stood in front of the large mirror in the hotel bathroom, observing the woman who looked back at me. She was no longer the disheveled wife in old loungewear, nor did she have the submissive, resigned face I wore every time my mother-in-law scolded me. I chose a subtly fitted burgundy silk dress that enhanced my fair skin and my still slender figure in the early months of pregnancy. I put on a touch of red lipstick, shaping my eyebrows with determination. Today was the day I signed the death warrant of my marriage. But why did it feel more like the day of my rebirth? I arrived at the lawyer's office 15 minutes early. I sat comfortably on the sofa, legs crossed, and enjoyed a cup of hot tea. When James and Beatrice walked in, I clearly noticed their steps falter. James stared at me, his eyes fixed on my radiant smile and my strangely beautiful appearance. Perhaps in the script he had written for himself, I was supposed to have eyes swollen from crying, begging him to reconsider. But what a shame. The Eleanor of today had died along with the faith I once had in him. Beatrice, at his side, scanned me from head to toe and then scowled. Her sarcastic and bitter voice echoed in the quiet office. Well, one would think you'd be heartbroken, but it turns out as soon as you saw the money, you showed your true colors. Truly, what a greedy and materialistic woman. It's a good thing my family got rid of you in time. Otherwise, who knows if you wouldn't have ended up selling the house. She tossed her designer handbag onto a chair and looked at me with disdain. I wasn't angry at all. On the contrary, I felt sorry for her. Her whole life had been lived among calculations and suspicions. How could she understand the feelings of a mother doing everything to protect her children? I gently set down my teacup and responded with a smile. "Beatrice, you flatter me. It's all thanks to the fortune your family has bestowed upon me. 5 million might be pocket change for you, but for me, it's a treasure to rebuild my life with. How could I not be happy?" James frowned, apparently annoyed by my indifferent attitude. He sat across from me and pushed the final revised divorce agreement in my direction. His voice was cold but held a hint of probing. "Don't you have anything to say? Don't you want to ask why I chose Sophia? Or don't you want to try and save this? Men are strange. When you love them to death, they treat you like nothing. When you let go without hesitation, their pride gets hurt." I picked up the pen, twirling it between my long fingers, and looked him straight in the eye without flinching. I asked what was the point in asking, James, since the outcome wouldn't change. You've found your soulmate, and I've found my freedom, plus a nice starting capital. This is what you call a win-win situation, a successful partnership. I emphasized the words successful partnership like a slap to his face, turning our 3-year marriage into a mere business transaction. I signed my name in the wife's section. My handwriting was fluid and decisive, without the slightest tremor. The sound of the pen on the paper was strangely pleasant. Just as I put the pen down, the phone in my purse vibrated, a message from the bank notifying me of a change in my balance. $5 million received in my account. I looked at that long number, and the corners of my lips curled involuntarily. It was done. The future of my 2 babies was partly secured. I stood up, gathered my documents, and extended my hand to James. He was taken aback for a moment before reluctantly shaking it. His hand was cold, devoid of the warmth of the husband I had shared a bed with. I leaned closer to his ear and whispered, just low enough for only the 2 of us to hear. My voice was sweet but laced with intent. "Thank you, my golden benefactor." I wish you and your old flame a happy life together. I'll be using this money to raise something 1,000 times more valuable than you." James was petrified, staring at me with wide eyes. He probably thought I would use the money for my upkeep or to buy luxuries, but it would never occur to him that the valuable thing I was referring to were the 2 drops of his own blood forming inside of me. I withdrew my hand, smiled, and gave a farewell nod to Beatrice, who was sitting with a resentful air, and walked out of the lawyer's office with long strides. The sound of my heels echoed on the floor like a triumphal march. As I walked out the door, the bright sunlight hit me, forcing me to squint. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered to my 2 children, "Let's go, little ones. Mommy and you are starting a new life." Behind me, the office door closed, separating me from a grim past. I didn't know that. Just as I left, James was still standing there, watching my retreating figure, with a vague sense of loss inside him that even he couldn't name. After leaving the lawyer's office, I didn't rush back to my parents' house, nor did I look for a temporary hotel. I took a cab straight to the most luxurious apartment complex in the city. That place that, before, every time I passed on my way to the market, I only dared to look at with a mixture of admiration and self-pity. Back then, I was a CEO's wife. I lived in an imposing mansion but never had more than $100 in my pocket for my own expenses. Now I was a divorced, pregnant woman, but with $5 million sleeping in my bank account. Life is certainly an ironic play. When we have love, we lack respect. When we have money, we are alone on the road ahead. I decided to rent a spacious penthouse with a view of the park, with absolute security and 24-hour on-call medical service. I spared no expense because I understood that the safety of the 2 little souls in my womb was, at that moment, priceless. After signing the lease, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the New York skyline bathed in the sunset light. I placed a hand on my belly and whispered, "My little ones, this will be our first nest. No grandmother to criticize us, no indifferent father, just the 3 of us and peace." That afternoon, I went on a shopping spree like I had never dared to dream of before. I got rid of all the gray and brown clothes Beatrice had forced me to wear to look like a docile daughter-in-law. I chose soft silk dresses for myself, elegant designer maternity wear, and most importantly, the best baby items for my 2 little angels. Holding a pair of tiny booties the size of my thumbs in my hand, tears welled up in my eyes. It turns out happiness isn't waiting for a man to come home for dinner, but building your own future with your own hands. While I was enjoying this luxurious freedom, on the other side of the city, the atmosphere in James's office was suffocating. He was sitting in his executive chair, spinning an expensive fountain pen, but his gaze was lost in the void. Sophia had arrived early, bringing a carefully decorated lunchbox with her. She placed it coquettishly on his desk and said in a honeyed voice, "Darling, I made this myself. Have some while it's warm." James looked at the container and involuntarily remembered the simple but warm lunches I used to secretly send with the security guard so he wouldn't get stomach aches. Back then, he used to frown, complaining about the hassle, telling me not to do such unnecessary things. Now, faced with the care of the woman he had longed for, he didn't understand why everything felt bland and empty. He forced a smile, opened the container, and ate a few bites out of obligation, but his mind drifted to the image of my radiant and dazzling smile from that morning. My phrase, "Thank you, my golden benefactor," echoed in his head like a curse. His assistant came in, cautiously placed a file on the table, and said, "Mr. Sinclair, as per your request, I've been monitoring the account you provided to Mrs. Eleanor. She made a considerable expenditure this afternoon." James smiled disdainfully, his voice full of contempt. "I knew it. Women accustomed to luxury, as soon as they get money, run to buy designer bags and shoes. She's as vulgar as the rest." But the assistant hesitated for a moment and then continued with a bewildered expression. "No, Mr. Sinclair, she didn't buy bags. She rented a luxury apartment, paying a year in advance, and bought a large quantity of children's furniture and very expensive imported vitamin supplements for—" The assistant left the sentence hanging, not daring to look his boss in the eye. James stopped dead, his thick eyebrows furrowing. The hand holding the fork trembled slightly. Children? Vitamins. Why was she buying those things if she had just been diagnosed as sterile by a doctor? Or was she using his money to take care of another man's child? An irrational jealousy and suspicion erupted in James's heart like a wind-stoked fire. He thought of my enigmatic smile, the coldness with which I signed the papers. What if the betrayed one in this marriage wasn't him, but me? The sudden afternoon rain beat against the office windows, creating a dry, rhythmic sound, identical to the anxious beats in James's chest. In that moment, he snatched the expense report from his assistant's hands. His bloodshot eyes quickly scanned each line. Breast pumps, a twin crib, prenatal vitamins, newborn clothes. Each item appeared as irrefutable proof of a truth he didn't dare or want to believe. James slammed the stack of papers on the table. The loud noise made Sophia, who was filing her nails on the sofa, jump. She rushed over to him. Her voice was sweet and slightly fake. "What's wrong, darling? Is something upsetting you so much?" James didn't answer. He pushed Sophia's hand away and started pacing the room like a wounded beast. Only one question spun in his head. Why? Why would a woman whose mother had thrown a medical report in her face the day before, calling her a fruitless tree, be buying these things today? There were two possibilities. 1. Eleanor had gone crazy and was buying things to console herself. 2. She was actually pregnant. But if she was pregnant, who was the father? James remembered the report his mother had given him. The conclusion was clear. Eleanor had polycystic ovaries. It was almost impossible for her to conceive. Besides, in the last 3 years, the times they had been together could be counted on one hand. The last time was that drunken night 3 months ago, but the next day he had forced her to take the morning after pill. Mistrust was an inherent trait in powerful men like James. He began to connect the dots. My recent distant attitude, the fact that I didn't try to hold on to him when he handed me the divorce papers, and that confident, haughty look at the lawyer's office. "Damn her!" James roared, clenching his fists. Did she dare to cheat on me? Did she dare to use the $5 million I worked so hard for to raise another man's child? The ego of a successful man was severely wounded. He could leave his wife, but he couldn't accept his ex-wife living better than him, much less accept that he had been deceived all this time. James turned to his assistant. His voice hissed through his teeth, menacing. He ordered him to immediately investigate where Eleanor was and who she was living with. Her past 3 months. I want to know who this man is, and find a way to confirm if she's really pregnant. The assistant nodded hastily and withdrew, sweat beading on his forehead. Meanwhile, in the newly rented penthouse, I was relaxing on a lounge chair on the balcony with a face mask on, listening to classical music. I knew James's character better than anyone suspicious and controlling. The use of his card for my purchases would surely send notifications to his phone. I didn't try to hide it, but I wasn't foolish enough to reveal everything either. I bought what was necessary but arranged the deliveries sporadically. Sometimes to the apartment, sometimes to the front desk, sometimes buying directly in-store. I knew he would suspect, that he would go crazy, but that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted him to live tormented by curiosity, never knowing the truth. I had hired 2 professional bodyguards to watch the elevator entrance and the apartment's front door. With $5 million in the bank, I could turn my home into an impregnable fortress. I caressed my belly, smiling faintly. Your father is starting to lose his temper, but don't worry, Mommy won't let anyone disturb your sleep. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I immediately guessed it was James's eyes and ears. I answered with a calm voice. Hello. The other end of the line was silent for a few seconds. Then came the familiar voice of his assistant, Mrs. Eleanor. No, Miss Eleanor. Mr. Sinclair wanted to ask you about some of your expenses today. I laughed. A cold laugh that echoed in the spacious apartment. I told him to tell his boss that the money in my pocket is mine. Whether I buy diapers or flowers for his grave, that's my business. He should worry less about other people's affairs and more about taking care of his precious lover. With that, I hung up and blocked the number. I knew that someone would not be sleeping tonight out of rage. As expected, the next morning, the apartment doorbell rang insistently. Through the security camera, I saw the furtive face of James's trusted assistant. He stood there holding a small box, looking around as if he were afraid of being discovered. I smiled, adjusted my loose white maternity dress, and deliberately wore no makeup to show a natural yet rosy and healthy face. I signaled for the bodyguards to open the door. The assistant entered. His eyes widened as he saw the luxurious penthouse space. He swallowed hard, placed the box on the glass table, and stammered, "Hello, Miss Eleanor. The boss asked me to bring you some things you forgot at the estate, and while I'm at it, to see how you are." I glanced at the box. Inside were only a few old books and some cheap jewelry I hadn't even bothered to take. An excuse so clumsy that even a child would have seen through it. I invited him to sit down. I poured him a glass of water. My gestures were as serene as a queen receiving a servant. I sat across from him, deliberately leaning back in the chair. My hand unconsciously rose to caress my abdomen, which was already starting to show under the silk dress. The assistant's gaze immediately fixed on my belly. The suspicion was evident. He stammered, "Miss Eleanor, you seem to have gained some weight. Your skin is also rosier than before." I laughed softly. My eyes shone with genuine happiness. I said that after leaving that golden cage, my spirit has been freed. I eat well and sleep well, so it's natural that I'm healthier. "Or are you going to report to your boss that I'm half dead?" The assistant waved his hands hastily. No. What I mean is, you've bought a lot of baby things." He left the sentence hanging, waiting for confirmation from me. I looked him straight in the eye. The smile on my lips turned cold and sharp. I knew he had a recorder on in his jacket pocket. This was the moment to deliver the psychological blow that would drive James mad. I said slowly, pronouncing each word clearly, "Are you curious? Or is it your boss who's curious?" "Well, for old time's sake, I'll tell you. Yes, I'm pregnant. With twins." The assistant's jaw dropped, speechless. Before he could ask more, I added the final blow. My words were as soft as cotton, but their impact was like 1,000 swords. "Go back and tell your boss to rest easy and enjoy his new conquest. It doesn't matter whose children they are. The important thing is that they definitely won't carry the Sinclair name. I'm not foolish enough to give birth to children for that ungrateful family." That sentence was a direct slap to the pride of my entire former in-law family. I was admitting my pregnancy but denying James's paternity, planting the idea in their minds that I had had someone else for a long time. The assistant turned pale and hastily made his excuses to leave. His walk was as hurried as a thief caught in the act. Half an hour later, in the CEO's office of the Sinclair Group, the sound of an antique vase shattering into 1,000 pieces silenced the entire floor. James had thrown the phone he had just listened to the recording on against the wall. His face was congested with anger. He roared like a wounded beast. "Damn her! How dare she say that? If they don't carry the Sinclair name, what damn bastard's name will they carry?" James frantically searched his memory. For 3 years, I had been cooped up at home, only going out to shop for groceries and cook. What opportunity had I had to meet someone? But the pregnancy was there. And it was twins. They couldn't have fallen from the sky. Blind jealousy clouded his reason, making him forget that he too had shared a passionate night with his wife. He only felt his pride trampled in the most humiliating way. The wife he had scorned and abandoned turned out to have cheated on him in a spectacular fashion. James slammed his fist on the table and ordered the trembling assistant in the corner to investigate. "Find that man at any cost. I want to see who was bold enough to touch the woman who was once the wife of James Sinclair. And get the car ready. I want to see her right now." In his fury, James didn't realize he wasn't acting like an ex-husband who felt nothing anymore, but like a man consumed by possessive jealousy. While James was burning with jealousy and rage at the Greenwich estate, Sophia, the woman he had so longed for, had officially moved in. She arrived with dozens of suitcases of clothes and cosmetics, quickly transforming my old bedroom into her own territory. Our wedding portraits were thrown into the storage room and replaced with gaudy abstract paintings she called art. Sophia was very skilled at winning Beatrice's favor. She gave her expensive gifts. She spent hours whispering confidences to her and praising how young, beautiful, and elegant she was. Beatrice, delighted, boasted everywhere about her future daughter-in-law, so capable and filial, unlike the kept country girl I was. But this perfect facade didn't last long. That night, James returned home looking distracted and exhausted. After his outburst in the office, he loosened his tie and slumped onto the sofa. His eyes were dark and heavy. Sophia rushed to greet him, dressed in a sheer and provocative silk nightgown. She curled up on James's lap and whispered, "You're back, darling. I was waiting for you for dinner. I made the filet mignon with red wine reduction you love so much." James looked at the table. The meat was burnt and blackened. The side dishes looked limp. It was obvious it was the work of an inexperienced cook or store-bought food reheated. He involuntarily remembered the meals I used to prepare. The filet mignon, always perfectly cooked, the sauce rich and balanced, the salad fresh and crisp. That unfavorable comparison made him feel even more disheartened. He pushed Sophia away and said in a tired voice, "I've already eaten. You eat." Sophia froze. A flash of resentment crossed her eyes, but she quickly hid it. She knew James was distracted by the issue with me. She sat beside him, her soft hand caressing his chest. Her tone shifted to one of false compassion. "Are you still thinking about Eleanor? I heard from your assistant that she's pregnant. Is it true?" James remained silent, but his hands clenched into fists. Seeing this, Sophia grew bolder. She whispered poisonous words in his ear. "I think you shouldn't be sad. The fact that Eleanor left so quickly and got pregnant immediately shows she had it all planned out. Who knows? Maybe that man was already in her life before you two divorced. Women these days are terrible. They look harmless, but you never know what they're hiding." Every word from Sophia was like adding fuel to the fire. James turned to look at her, his eyes bloodshot. "You think she cheated on me too?" Sophia feigned innocence, blinking. "I wouldn't dare say for sure, but think about it. You were married for 3 years with no children. The doctor said it would be hard for her to conceive, and right after she leaves, she gets pregnant with twins and has money to rent a luxury apartment. If it weren't for a rich man supporting her, where would she get it?" James shot up, jealousy and suspicion erupting again. He rushed to his study and called a private investigator to pressure him. He wanted the truth. He wanted to unmask me, to prove that I was a despicable traitor. He rummaged through my planner, call logs, even the car's GPS tracking for the past 3 months, but the more he investigated, the more bewildered the results left him. The detailed report from the detective showed that for the past 3 months, I had lived like a shadow. To the market in the morning, cooking at noon, cleaning in the afternoon, waiting for my husband at night. I hadn't met with any unknown men. There were no suspicious calls, and no money transfers to my account other than the $5 million he had given me. James held the file. A cold sweat beaded on his forehead. If I hadn't cheated on him, if there was no other man, then where did the pregnancy come from? He collapsed into his chair. A chill ran down his spine. A crazy idea, a possibility he had never dared to consider, began to form in his head. He checked the calendar. His trembling finger stopped on March 15th, exactly 3 months prior. It was the day of the company's anniversary party, and also the night he came home drunk. The tranquility of my new apartment stood in stark contrast to the storm raging in James's heart. I later learned that right after hearing the recording and reading the detective's report, James lost his cool and did something reckless. He searched his contacts for the number of the family's private doctor, the one who had attended to me for the past 3 years and who had also signed the report concluding I had polycystic ovaries. James wanted a definitive answer, not from my sharp tongue, but from a professional. In his cold, air-conditioned office, James growled into the phone. Each word was like a knife to the listener's throat. "Dr. Evans, tell me the truth. What is Eleanor's real medical history? How is it possible that she's pregnant with twins?" The other end of the line was silent for a long moment. Only a short, fearful breath could be heard. "Doctor." Evans was an old acquaintance of Beatrice's, but faced with the threat from James, who held shares in the hospital, he dared not hide the truth any longer. He confessed, trembling, "Mr. Sinclair, the truth is, Mrs. Eleanor is perfectly healthy. The infertility report. Your mother forced me to fake it to have an excuse to get rid of her, and as for the pregnancy," he hesitated a moment, then continued, his voice barely a whisper. "In the last checkup before she left, I had already detected signs of pregnancy. Calculating based on her menstrual cycle and the size of the gestational sac on the ultrasound, the date of conception perfectly matches the night of March 15th. The phone slipped from James's hand and landed with a dull thud on the polished mahogany desk. March 15th. He remembered that night perfectly. The company anniversary party. He drank until he blacked out, and the chauffeur drove him home. In his drunken state, he had mistaken me for Sophia, embracing me passionately and desirously. The next morning, upon waking and seeing me beside him, he angrily threw a box of the morning after pill at me and forbade me from ever mentioning the matter again. It turned out I hadn't taken that pill, or fate had arranged for it not to work. James sat there, stunned, his hands in his head, his fingers dug into his messy hair. The words twins and the fateful date danced in his head, a dizzying mix of hope and sharp pain. I hadn't been unfaithful. I hadn't betrayed him. Those children were his children, the Sinclair family bloodline they so longed for. Suddenly, James felt a tightness in his chest. A feeling of remorse mixed with a savage possessiveness took hold of him. He remembered my cold gaze, my statement that they wouldn't carry the Sinclair name. It turned out I knew everything. I had silently endured the humiliation, taken the money, and taken his children away with me. It can't be. James jumped up, knocking over the imposing presidential chair. He muttered like a madman, "They're my children. She has no right to take them away." The important shareholders' meeting was underway, but the chairman's seat was empty. James stormed out of the company like a whirlwind, leaving behind the astonished gazes of dozens of subordinates. He jumped into his car, floored the accelerator. The luxury vehicle roared and shot into the busy streets. In his mind, there were no more profits, no projects, no image of Sophia, only my image, with my swelling belly and a defiant smile. It began to pour. The drops beat hard against the windshield, blurring the view like James's chaotic mind. He was afraid. For the first time in his life, this arrogant man felt fear. Fear that I would take the children and disappear. Fear that I would teach them to call another man father. Fear that the Sinclair bloodline would be lost. Selfishly, he thought that I was his property, and that the children in my womb were also possessions he had carelessly lost. In the penthouse, I was sitting peacefully, reading a book on prenatal education. A glass of warm milk was beside me. The doorbell rang insistently and repetitively, shattering the calm. I looked at the camera screen. It was James, soaked from the rain. His eyes were red and bloodshot. He was pounding on the door, shouting my name, with no trace of a CEO's haughty demeanor. My bodyguard approached. His voice was deep. "Ma'am, do you want us to handle this?" I looked at the crazed man through the screen. A mix of satisfaction and bitterness welled up in me. He was suffering. He was worried. Compared to the 3 years I spent waiting for him, compared to the humiliation of being kicked out by his mother, what was a little rain to him? I put down the milk glass, stood up, adjusted my clothes, and told the bodyguard, "No need, I'll open it." Hiding was not the solution. Whatever was meant to happen, would happen. I knew James had discovered the truth with his power and suspicion. Questioning Dr. Evans was only a matter of time. But I wasn't afraid because now I held the most powerful weapon, a mother's determination. I walked to the door. I took a deep breath to calm myself. The heavy wooden door opened slowly. James stood there. Rainwater dripped from his hair down his handsome face, now contorted with anger. He saw me, and his eyes seemed to want to devour me. As soon as he entered, he lunged at me, cornering me against the cold hallway wall. He slammed his hands hard on the wall, trapping me in a firm but threatening embrace. His hot breath, mixed with the smell of tobacco and rain, hit my face. He growled, each word between his teeth. "Eleanor, how long did you plan to hide this from me? Where did you think you were taking my children? Do you take me for a fool?" I stood still, my back against the wall, my head held high, looking directly into his flaming eyes. If this had been the old me, I would have trembled and curled into his arms, begging for forgiveness. But now, his closeness only disgusted me. I used all my strength to push his chest. My voice was cold and sharp. "Get your filthy hands off me. We're divorced. Have you forgotten? Legally, you and I are strangers. James took a few steps back but pointed at my belly and shouted, "So what if we're divorced? The child in your womb is my child. Doctor, Evans confessed everything. The dates match. Don't try to deny it." He came closer. His tone shifted from anger to possessiveness. "Come home with me. The children of James Sinclair cannot live in hiding out there. My mother is dying to have grandchildren. Don't be so selfish." I laughed. A bitter laugh that echoed in the spacious apartment. "Selfish? You call me selfish?" I took a step forward, forcing him to retreat. "When your mother threw that fake medical report in my face, where were you? When you gave me $5 million to buy my 3 years of youth, did you think of me? When you welcomed your ex-girlfriend into our home, did you think about how much it would hurt me?" I looked at him with the utmost contempt. "You're right. This child is the result of that night, but don't forget it was you who forced me to take the morning after pill. It was you who rejected him before he even existed. What right do you have to come and claim him as yours now?" James was speechless. His face turned from red to pale. My words were like needles piercing him, leaving him defenseless, but the arrogance of a superior man wouldn't let him back down. He snarled, "I don't care about the past. Right now, he carries my blood. I have the right to raise him. The $5 million is payment for custody. If you want more, I'll give it to you. Money again." In his eyes, everything could be bought with money, even a mother's love. I felt a sharp pain in my chest from anger. I pointed to the door and shouted, "Get out, this is my house. I don't welcome people like you. If you don't leave, I'll call security to drag you out. You don't want the great CEO of Sinclair Group to be publicly embarrassed." James stared at me. He had probably never seen me so determined and fierce. He tried to grab my arm again, but I stepped back and accidentally bumped into a decorative shelf near the door. The jolt caused the purse I had left there to fall to the floor. Its contents spilled out. A lipstick, my wallet, car keys, and a white sheet of paper carefully kept in a medical folder. The paper slid across the polished tile floor and stopped right at James's feet. It was the 4D ultrasound I had done the day before. The image of 2 fetuses curled up together was clearly visible in black and white. James bent down and picked up the paper with trembling hands. He stared at the image. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Twins, too." His voice broke. There was no trace of his earlier aggression, only a strange and overwhelming emotion. For the first time, this man saw the form of his children, these little lives growing day by day that he had almost discarded. James's finger gently stroked the image of the 2 little heads. His eyes reddened. An intense paternal emotion surged within him, erasing all doubts and calculations. He looked up at me. His gaze was pleading, weak, pathetic. "Eleanor, are they boys or girls? Are they healthy?" Seeing him like this, my heart softened for an instant, but reason immediately brought me back to harsh reality. I couldn't give in. If I showed weakness now, my children and I would fall back into the same tragedy. I lunged and snatched the ultrasound from his hands, hastily stuffing it back into my purse as if afraid he would steal it. "You don't need to know," I said coldly. My voice was firm. "Boy or girl, healthy or sick, it has nothing to do with you. You signed the divorce. You settled your debts. Congratulations, 2 for 1, but too bad they will only carry my last name. You have no right to be their father, nor do you deserve to be called Dad." James stood as if petrified, his hands still in the same posture, empty and desolate. My words were like a bucket of cold water, extinguishing the small hope that had just been born. He stammered, I was wrong. I'll make it up to you. I'll bring you back home. We'll start over. My mother will be so happy to know." "Happy?" I interrupted, laughing sarcastically. "Happy to have an heir, or happy to have something else to brag about? Go ask your mother if she dares to look me in the eye after what she's done. James, you can't unspill water. Take your money, your honor, and leave. Don't force me to call the police and report you for trespassing." James looked at me. His eyes reflected a struggle between remorse and helplessness. He knew I was capable of keeping my word. He took a step back, and then another, looking lost, as if he had lost his soul. Before the door closed, He turned to look at me one last time, his gaze fixed on my belly with longing. "I won't give up. They are my children. I will fight for them." The door slammed shut in James's face, separating two worlds. I leaned against the door, sliding to the floor. I hugged the ultrasound and burst into tears. I had won this battle, but why did my heart ache as if someone were squeezing it? I thought that after slamming the door in James's face, after speaking those knife-sharp words, he would retreat out of wounded pride. But I was wrong. The arrogance of a man accustomed to being in control wouldn't let him accept defeat. James did not give up. He began a campaign of harassment so persistent and twisted that I felt suffocated in my own home. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of James's bloodshot gaze appeared. I drew the curtains and looked down at the street. His luxurious black car was still parked there. The lights were off, but I knew he was inside. The car looked like a predator on the prowl, waiting patiently outside its prey's den, exuding an invisible pressure that made me shudder. The next morning, when I opened the window for some fresh air, my eyes met the same car. James got out. His suit from yesterday was wrinkled. A stubble shadowed his jaw. He looked exhausted. Seeing me look down, he looked up. Our gazes met in the silence. He said nothing, just stood there, stubbornness etched on every feature of his face. The following days were mental torture. If I went for an ultrasound, his car would follow me silently. If I went down to the building's grocery store, his bodyguards would block the aisles, doing nothing, just watching me as if I were a prisoner. The freedom I had just begun to taste was now being choked by my ex-husband's irrational control. On the 5th day, I couldn't take it anymore. I put on a light jacket, went down to the lobby, and walked straight to the poorly parked car in the visitors area. I knocked sharply on the window. James rolled it down. The air conditioning and the strong smell of tobacco made me wrinkle my nose. He looked at me. His voice was hoarse from lack of sleep. "You finally decided to come down and see me. Come home, Eleanor. Mom is waiting for you." I looked at the man who was once my entire world. Now he seemed so strange and detestable. I suppressed my anger and pronounced each word clearly. "James, do you realize what you're doing? We're divorced. You are harassing my private life. You are the CEO of a major corporation. Why are you behaving like a pervert stalking women?" James opened the door and got out of the car. He reached out to grab my shoulder, but I stepped back. He withdrew his hand, clenched it into a fist, and growled, "I'm not harassing you. I'm protecting my children. You're carrying the Sinclair bloodline around. Do you think I can just sit calmly in the mansion and enjoy myself? Stop being so stubborn. At home, you have doctors and staff to take care of you. Isn't that better than this cold apartment?" I laughed bitterly. The wind tousled my hair. I looked him in the eye and replied, "Better to go back so your mother can criticize every bite I eat? To go back to watch you and your lover act out your romance? You say you're protecting your children, but in reality, you're only satisfying your own possessive instinct. You don't love me or these unborn children. You're just afraid people will gossip that James Sinclair's ex-wife took his children." James stared at me. Perhaps he didn't expect me to see through his dark heart, something he himself was trying to ignore. He stepped closer, his tall figure casting a shadow over me. "Think what you want, but I'm warning you. Either you come back with me willingly, or I'll take you back by force. Don't test my patience." I flinched at his threat. I knew he wasn't joking. He had money, power, and most importantly, he was desperate at the news of having 2 heirs. I turned and walked away, leaving behind a cold sentence. "Try it if you want. I'm not the naive Eleanor I used to be. If you push me too far, I'll make sure the whole world knows the true face of your family." James's threat was not in vain. The next day, he began to act. In the morning, while I was eating oatmeal, I heard a loud noise in the hallway. I looked through the peephole and saw my neighbors from the 2 adjacent apartments moving out. I asked around and learned that an anonymous tycoon had paid double the market price to buy all the apartments on my floor, demanding immediate possession. I froze. The silver spoon trembled in my hand. I didn't need to guess who that tycoon was. James was turning my floor into a gilded prison. He wanted to isolate me so that when I opened my eyes, I would see his people, and when I closed them, I would feel his control. This act of using money to oppress others enraged and disgusted me. But he didn't stop there. In the afternoon, when I went to the private hospital for my checkup, I saw a small truck parked at the entrance. Workers were unloading boxes and boxes of supplements, birds' nests, shark fins, ginseng, piling them up at the reception. The head nurse saw me and rushed over with an expression of admiration and confusion. She said, "Miss Eleanor, your ex-husband sent these. He also donated a state-of-the-art ultrasound machine to the maternity department on the sole condition that we provide you with special care." I looked at the mountain of gifts and felt as if I were looking at a pile of chains. James was using money to buy everyone around me, from my neighbors to my doctors, turning them into his eyes and ears, tools to control me. He wanted to show me that no matter where I went, the power of the Sinclair money would envelop my children and me. I approached the head nurse. My voice was icy. "Please return everything, or if you can't, donate it to charity. I won't use it, and I don't need any special treatment. I pay for my medical services. I need privacy, not this ostentatious handout." With that, I walked to the doctor's office, leaving the murmurs behind. In the waiting room, I sent a message to James. "Do you think money gives you the right to do whatever you want? You can buy houses and doctors, but you can't buy my respect." As soon as I sent it, James called. I didn't answer. I let it ring until it stopped. I knew he was trying to corner me, to make me feel suffocated and helpless so that I would go back. But he was wrong. The more he pushed me, the stronger I became. That afternoon, returning home, the hallway was eerily silent. The two neighboring apartments had their doors closed with new locks. I felt like a bird in a golden cage. I went inside, locked the door, and sank onto the sofa, hugging my belly. Tears of self-pity streamed down my face. Why was it so hard to live in peace and raise my children? Why wouldn't this man leave me alone? At that moment, the doorbell rang. I jumped and looked stealthily. It wasn't James or his assistant, but a delivery man with a stunning bouquet of red roses. Next to it, a card with James's familiar handwriting. "Come home, Eleanor. Don't be stubborn. The children and you need me. And I have enough money to give you the best life in the world." I crumpled the card in my hand. The best life in the world. A life without love, only possession and money to solve problems. That was hell, not paradise. I threw the bouquet in the trash. The red petals fell like drops of blood, foreshadowing the tragedies that were to come, which I could not foresee. James, engrossed in his battle to win back his wife and children, had forgotten that in his luxurious mansion there was a woman plotting day and night. Sophia, the woman he had once treasured like a jewel, was now treated with coldness, abandoned like an old-fashioned ornament. She saw James leave early and come back late. She saw him secretly looking at my ultrasound pictures. She saw the huge bills for buying apartments and the gifts sent to my home. The jealousy of a selfish woman erupted like a wildfire, consuming what little judgment she had left. Sophia understood that if I returned, if my 2 children were born and recognized by the Sinclair family, she would lose everything. Her dream of being the lady of the mansion, the CEO's wife, would vanish. She couldn't accept it. She had invested so much effort, acted out so many innocent plays for James to get a divorce. How could she let me turn the tables so easily? "If I can't have him, I'll destroy him," Sophia muttered to herself in front of the mirror. Her made-up eyes shone with a malicious light. She picked up the phone and called a professional paparazzi she knew from the entertainment world. She hatched a cruel plan to destroy my reputation, to turn me from a victim into the culprit in the eyes of the public. The next day, an article with a sensational headline went viral on social media. "Scandal: Tycoon Jay Sinclair's ex-wife uses twin pregnancy to extort him. Leaves him for another, yet demands a $5 million payout." Alongside the article were high-quality, secretly taken photos showing James and me arguing in front of my apartment. The angle of the photos was cleverly manipulated. James looked desperate and pleading. while I appeared with my arms crossed, a cold expression, and a dismissive attitude. Another photo showed me getting out of a luxury taxi, holding a designer bag that I had actually bought myself, next to a burly bodyguard. The article was written with a scathing tone, pretending to be from an eyewitness. Poor Jay. Sinclair loved his wife so much, he didn't even leave her when she couldn't have children. And now, as soon as she gets pregnant by another man, she asks for a divorce, takes $5 million, and leaves to support her lover. Now that he's going to her to plead for his children, she kicks him out like a dog. What a black heart that woman has. In a few hours, the article was shared at a dizzying speed. Gossip groups and tabloid websites replicated it. The public, always eager for high society drama, pounced on me. They didn't know the truth. They only saw what was presented to them. I was drinking orange juice when my phone started vibrating non-stop. Facebook messages, WhatsApp, even texts from unknown numbers flooded in. Slut, give him back his children. How can such a cruel mother exist? Aren't you afraid of karma for those $5 million? The malicious words danced before my eyes, making me dizzy. I tremblingly opened the original article. Thousands of hateful comments mercilessly insulting me. Some even tagged my friends and family to humiliate me. Sophia, the architect of this drama, must have been enjoying herself at home, savoring a glass of wine and laughing at my pain. She had hit my weakest point, my honor and my peace. She wanted to use the internet mob to corner me, to force me to have an abortion or go crazy from the pressure. I dropped the phone on the sofa and clutched my head. Fear took over me. Not fear of the insults, but fear that the crowd's fury would harm my children. I never imagined a woman's heart could be so venomous. The social media storm wasn't limited to insults on a screen. It began to spill over into the real world, directly threatening my safety and that of my children. A few hours after the article was published, my building's address and even my apartment number were leaked in the comments. That afternoon, I heard a commotion in the lobby. Through the window, I saw a group of strangers, including some aggressive-looking women, doing a live stream, pointing at my floor, and shouting slogans to boycott the other woman and demand justice for the tycoon. The security staff had to struggle to prevent them from getting on the elevator. I huddled in a corner of the room with the lights off and the curtains drawn, not daring to make a sound. My heart pounded as if it would burst out of my chest. Anxiety overwhelmed me. I was afraid they would find a way to come up. I was afraid they would throw dirty things at my door. I was afraid they would hurt me. My stomach began to ache, a dull, constant pain. Small contractions sent me into a panic. I hastily searched for the medication the doctor had prescribed. My hands trembled so much that I spilled water on the floor. At that moment, my phone rang again. It was James. I hesitated for a moment and then answered. My voice broke with fear and anger. Are you happy now? Are you and your lover satisfied? You want to kill me and my children with the world's gossip, don't you? On the other end of the line, James's voice sounded urgent and worried. Eleanor, calm down and listen to me. I didn't do this. I swear. I just found out. My communications team is already working on it, requesting the article be taken down. Don't read the comments. Don't go out. I'm on my way now. Don't come, I screamed. Tears streamed down. Your presence will only make things worse. They'll take pictures of us together and say, I'm seducing you again. James, you have money, you have power, you can buy the whole world, but you can't protect your own family from the evil of the woman you once loved. You're useless. I hung up, threw the phone aside. The stomach pain intensified. I lay on my side, hugging my abdomen, whispering to my children, I'm sorry, so sorry. Mommy couldn't protect your peace. Outside, the sky darkened, heralding rain, just like the day I was kicked out of my in-laws' house. The difference was that this time, I was not only alone, but also besieged by the cruelty of the world. James said he was fixing it, but I knew that once information goes viral, even if the original is deleted, thousands of copies still exist. This stain on my honor would follow me, haunt me. And the most bitter part of it all was realizing that no matter how much James tried to make up for it, it was his past weakness and blindness that indirectly gave Sophia the knife to stab me today. The doorbell rang again, insistent and violent. It wasn't the polite ring of a visitor, but sharp pounds on the door. I held my breath and looked at the screen. It wasn't James or the security staff. It was an unknown woman, her face covered by a mask, holding a bucket of dark red liquid. She looked directly at the camera. Her eyes shone with fury. I shuddered and backed away. Had they managed to get up? Not even the security of a luxury building could stop the anger of these internet vigilantes. The violent pounding on the door and the furious gaze of the unknown woman through the camera snapped me to my senses. The initial fear gave way to a mother's survival instinct. I understood that if I continued to cower within these four walls, waiting for the compassion or protection of a weak man like James, my children and I would be crushed. It was time to stand up, not to justify myself, but to fight back. I retreated to the bedroom, double-locked the door, and tremblingly dialed a number I hadn't dared to call in a long time. On the other end of the line was the warm, familiar voice of Michael, my parents' best friend, and now the editor-in-chief of a major newspaper. When my parents died, he promised to treat me like a daughter, but out of pride and Beatrice's prohibition, I had distanced myself from him. "Eleanor, is that you, kiddo? I heard you've been having some trouble." Michael's voice was full of concern and compassion. Hearing the voice of a loved one, the tears flowed. All my pent-up pain overflowed. I told him everything through sobs. The fake medical report, the $5 million to force the divorce, Sophia's smear campaign. Michael listened in silence. Only his heavy sigh could be heard on the other end. When I finished, his voice hardened, filled with the indignation of a father seeing his daughter trampled on. "Damn it, the Sinclairs think they're above everyone. They treat people like dirt. Don't you worry, kid. I won't let this stand. Do you have proof?" I wiped my tears. My gaze became firm. "I have everything, Uncle Mike." I saved the fake report with the family doctor's signature, James's texts pressuring me to divorce, and the recording of his assistant admitting they used money to bribe medical staff. "I want a press conference, or at least an article exposing their true colors." Michael agreed immediately. That night, while the enraged mob continued to insult me online, I sat in front of my computer and carefully sent him every piece of evidence. Each click of the mouse was a self-inflicted cut to remove the tumor. I knew that doing this meant declaring war on my former in-laws, burning all bridges. But as I looked at my belly, where two little souls were nestled, I knew I had no other choice. Outside, the rain continued to fall. The wind whistled through the window cracks, like the wail of helpless women, but I no longer felt cold. The flame of resistance had been lit, illuminating the dark path I walked. I whispered to my children, "Sleep tight, little ones. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, Mommy will fight for our justice. I will show them how fearsome a cornered woman can be." At 10 a.m. the next day, right at the peak of social media activity, a lengthy article with a shocking headline appeared on the front page of Michael's prestigious newspaper, The Truth. Behind the $5 million divorce, a mother-in-law fakes medical reports to oust her twin pregnant daughter-in-law and make room for a former lover. The article didn't use sensational language but presented solid, chilling evidence. The image of the report declaring me sterile next to the twin ultrasound with matching dates was a direct slap in Beatrice's face. It was followed by the recording of the assistant's call, revealing the calculations and contempt of the opulent family. Public opinion, fickle as ever, did a 180-degree turn. Those who called me a gold digger yesterday now sympathized with the abandoned wife. The wave of outrage this time was even greater, but directed at the Sinclairs and Sophia. Netizens called her the other woman, the homewrecker, the one who played the victim. The fashion and cosmetic brands collaborating with Sophia announced the cancellation of their contracts for fear of a boycott. Sophia went from being a sought-after socialite to a cornered rat, afraid to go out. Beatrice didn't fare any better. That morning at the market, she was recognized, pointed at, and whispered about. What an evil woman, kicking out her twin pregnant daughter-in-law and accusing her of infidelity. Like mother, like son. Someone more worked up threw a bunch of wilted vegetables at her. My haughty mother-in-law had to cover her face with her purse and flee to her car, humiliated. The Sinclair Group's stock plummeted. James, in his office, stared at the red graph on the screen with a pale face. He hadn't expected such a strong and organized response from me. He called me, but this time his tone was not one of command or condescension, but of trembling helplessness. "Eleanor, can you stop this? I'm begging you. My mother has fainted. The company is in chaos." I held the phone by the window, watching the bustling city. Satisfaction mixed in my heart, but I felt no joy. I answered with surprising calm. "James, this is the price you all have to pay. When you cornered me, did you think about this day? Your mother faints and she has doctors, but when I was thrown out into the rain, who cared about me? Enjoy it, because this is just the beginning." I hung up and sank onto the sofa. The spacious apartment was still quiet, but the suffocating atmosphere had dissipated. The storm outside had not yet calmed down when a special guest appeared at my door. It was James's grandfather, the true patriarch of the Sinclair family, just returned from abroad after a long convalescence. Unlike the caustic Beatrice or the weak-willed James, the grandfather was a profound, reasonable, and highly honorable man. When I arrived as a daughter-in-law, he was the only one who looked at me with kindness. He would even sometimes give me some pocket money on the sly. He entered, leaning on his cane, followed by his loyal, elderly assistant. Seeing me with my prominent belly, his old eyes filled with intense emotion, he sat down and said in a trembling voice, "Eleanor, child, I've come back too late. I've let you suffer. It's my fault for not knowing how to raise my son and grandson." The apology from an old man, a patriarch, made me feel a lump in my throat. I served him a cup of tea, trying to contain my emotions. "Don't say that, Grandpa. This has nothing to do with you. It's just that my fate with James has run its course. I don't blame anyone, only myself, for choosing the wrong person." The grandfather sighed and placed a thick folder on the table. "I've read the papers and I've already given that grandson of mine a piece of my mind. I know you're angry, but the children you're carrying are Sinclair blood. I can't let them wander aimlessly. These are the transfer papers for 5% of the group's shares for my 2 unborn great-grandchildren and a villa in the suburbs for you to recover. Accept it, as a small compensation." I looked at the folder, grateful, but reason forced me to be firm. I gently pushed it back towards him and shook my head. "I appreciate it, Grandpa, but I can't accept it. I have enough means to take care of them. I don't want to have anything to do with the Sinclair fortune. I don't want people to say later that I used my children to fight for the inheritance. I only ask that you let me live in peace." The grandfather looked at me intently with a mixture of regret and admiration. He nodded. "This girl is still as strong as ever. All right, I respect your decision, but promise me that when they're born, you'll let me visit them." This old man doesn't have much time left. I just hope I can hold my great-grandchildren once. I nodded and took the ultrasound out of my purse to show him. He took the black and white image. His wrinkled, trembling hands caressed the shape of the 2 babies. Tears rolled down his cheeks. In that moment, the tension between us seemed to melt away, leaving only the sacred family bond. Before he left, the grandfather turned and looked at me. His voice became grave and enigmatic. "You recover peacefully. From now on, whoever dares to touch you and your children will have to deal with me. And as for that little hussy, I'll take care of her myself." I knew he was referring to Sophia. His promise was a protective shield. But unintentionally, it also pushed Sophia to the brink, making her hatred even more crazed and cruel. Sophia sat in a dark room in the mansion, surrounded by empty wine bottles. From being on the verge of reaching the top, she had now lost everything. Contracts canceled, insulted on social media. James ignored her, and the newly arrived grandfather had forbidden her from entering the family home. All because of me, because of the pregnancy. In her drunken despair, a dark idea sprouted in her mind. She remembered an old classmate, now the head nurse at the private clinic where I used to have my checkups, a place I trusted for its good service and discretion. But that trust became a fatal vulnerability. Sophia picked up the phone. Her hoarse voice promised a huge sum of money to bribe her friend and carry out a ruthless act. The next day, I went to the clinic for my scheduled appointment. Everything went as normal. The doctor examined me, did an ultrasound, and prescribed iron and calcium supplements. I picked up the medicine from the pharmacy without suspecting a thing. I didn't know that in a moment of staff carelessness, the contents of my prenatal vitamin bottle had been switched. The pink pills had been replaced with a medication that caused strong uterine contractions, normally used to expel lochia after childbirth or to induce labor itself. When I got home, I poured a glass of water and took the pill. The pill slid down my throat, carrying with it the cruel fate of my children and me. I continued folding baby clothes, humming happily, imagining the day my 2 little angels would be born. I had no idea that death was knocking at my door. Sophia, hidden in a corner of the building's lobby, watched my apartment window. A savage smile played on her lips as she murmured, "Eleanor, you're very clever, but let's see what you have left to fight me with without those 2 bastards. You've won the hearts of the people, but I'll win with my tricks. In this game, the cruelest one wins." About 2 hours later, as I was getting ready for bed, a sharp, sudden pain shot through my lower abdomen. At first, it was dull, but it quickly became intense, twisting me in spasms. A cold sweat soaked my forehead. I hugged my belly, trying to breathe deeply, but the pain didn't subside. Instead, it became more frequent. A warm liquid ran down my legs, sending me into a panic. I looked down. My white nightgown was stained red. Blood, a lot of blood. My children! I screamed in despair, trying to reach the phone that had fallen to the floor. The screen was blurry through my tears. I quickly dialed the last number, not knowing who it was, just seeking help with my last breath. "Help, my children." On the other end of the line was James's alarmed voice, but my ears were already ringing. Darkness began to swallow everything. Only the heart-wrenching pain torturing my body remained. I curled up on the cold floor, still clutching the phone as if it were my last lifesaver in a stormy sea. The blood kept flowing. It soaked the soft wool carpet. The dark red spread like cursed flowers in the night. In that fragile moment between life and death, I didn't think about money, or hatred, or the cruel words of the world. In my head, only the cries of 2 children who hadn't had time to be born echoed, the tender call of mommy that I had dreamed of every night. I later learned that this fateful call reached James just as he was in the middle of the most tense board meeting. When the phone rang, shattering the suffocating atmosphere, James almost hung up, thinking it was me calling to argue or negotiate. But a father's instinct, or an invisible blood tie, stopped him. He answered, and my faint, broken cry for help made the cold man's heart stop. James later said he had never felt so much fear in his life. Not fear of losing honor or fortune, but the fear of forever losing a part of his own flesh. James rushed out of the boardroom like a madman, leaving behind the astonished gazes of the veteran shareholders. He ran to the underground parking garage. His hands trembled so much that he dropped the keys twice before he could open the door. The car shot out into the pouring rain, running every red light, weaving through the dense city traffic. As he drove, he shouted into the phone, trying to keep me conscious, but he only got a terrifying silence and the sound of my increasingly faint breathing. He called an ambulance, his assistant, even his grandfather, mobilizing all his contacts to clear the way to the hospital as quickly as possible. When James broke down my apartment door, the scene he found became a nightmare that would haunt him for the rest of his life. I lay motionless in a pool of blood, my face pale and colorless, my lips purple and tight. James ran and lifted me into his arms. His expensive suit was stained with my blood and that of my children. He ran as if racing against death, tears mixed with the salty rain on his lips. He whispered in my ear, his voice broken with panic. "Eleanor, don't fall asleep. I'm begging you, don't fall asleep. Your children are waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. You can't give up." In the ambulance, the siren wailed, tearing through the silent night. The nurses surrounded me, injecting medicine, starting an IV, constantly announcing my free-falling vital signs. James squeezed my icy hand, rubbing it incessantly to bring back some warmth. He watched the heart monitor, the faint green waves pulsing, and for the first time, this arrogant man prayed. He prayed to God, to his ancestors, to any force that could save our lives. In my delirium, I felt like I was floating in a frozen river, the cold seeping into my bones. but then a warm hand grabbed me, pulling me back, preventing the current from dragging me away. I heard James's voice, a desperate and pained voice, so different from his usual authoritarian tone. That voice was like an anchor that kept my soul tied to this world, reminding me that I couldn't die. I had to live to protect my children. I had to live to see tomorrow. The ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the hospital entrance. Doctors were already waiting with a gurney. They rushed me inside. The ceiling lights passed like shooting stars. The emergency room doors slammed shut, leaving James outside. In that instant, the line between life and death was as thin as a hair, and the fate of my children and me was entirely in the hands of the doctors and a miracle. The hospital corridors smelled intensely of disinfectant, that characteristic scent where life and death intertwine, causing nausea and fear. James was leaning against the wall with his head in his hands, trembling uncontrollably. His white shirt was stained with dried, hardened blood. He looked more pathetic and desperate than ever. The grandfather and the assistant had also arrived. The old man sat in the waiting room, leaning on his cane, his eyes closed, muttering prayers. No one dared to say anything. The atmosphere was as heavy as if a 1,000-pound slab was pressing on everyone's chest. The emergency room doors burst open. A doctor came out, pulling down his mask to reveal a tense, sweaty face. James rushed to him and grabbed his arm. His voice broke. "My wife, my children, how are they, doctor?" The doctor looked at him seriously. "The situation is critical. The patient has been poisoned with a high dose of a medication that causes uterine contractions, which has led to a placental abruption and massive hemorrhaging. The uterus is contracting violently, and the heart rates of both babies are weakening rapidly. We need to perform an emergency C-section. If we delay, we could lose all of them." The words fell on James like a thunderbolt. His legs gave way. "Poisoned," he murmured, not understanding why I would have taken such a lethal drug. But it was not the time to look for culprits. The doctor handed him a surgical consent form. His voice was urgent. "You need to sign this right now. But I must warn you, due to the massive blood loss and the side effects of the medication, the operation is very high risk. In the worst-case scenario, if there are complications, we will be forced to prioritize saving one over the other. The family must be prepared." The doctor's unfinished sentence was like a knife to James's heart. He took the pen. His hands trembled so much he could barely write his name. Save one over the other. How could he choose? On one side, the wife he had just realized he owed so much to. On the other, the two unborn children he so longed for. This cruel choice was the most severe punishment for his indifference and arrogance. As I lay on the operating table, the anesthesia began to take effect. My consciousness faded like a flame in the wind. In my half-sleep, I heard a heated argument outside the door. I heard the doctor's urgent voice, and then James's cry, which pierced the thick walls and echoed in my mind. "Save the mother. Do you hear me, doctor? You have to save her at all costs. If you have to choose, I choose my wife. I don't want the children if she dies. Do you understand?" Those words resonated in my head, clear and painful. Tears welled up in my eyes and rolled down my cold temples. I had always thought James only cared about the pregnancy, the heir. I had always thought he sought me out only for these two children. But in that moment of life and death, faced with the cruelest choice, he had chosen me. He had chosen the woman he once abandoned over the children his whole family awaited. James signed the consent form. His handwriting was a scrawl of desperation. He rested his head on his grandfather's shoulder and cried like a child. The grandfather patted his back. His old eyes were also red. He understood. His grandson had matured, but the price of that maturity was too high. James stood there, watching as the operating room door closed again. The red light of the surgery switched on, like the color of blood. He whispered into the void, "Eleanor, you have to live. Hate me if you want. Don't forgive me if you want, but you have to live. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Inside the operating room, doctors and nurses raced against time. The metallic sound of instruments, the rapid beeping of monitors, the short, precise orders from the surgeon. I gradually sank into an infinite darkness, taking James's late confession with me as a final, faint ray of light that warmed my long, frozen heart. Time passed. Each second, each minute, slow and heavy, as if someone had tied lead to the hands of the clock. Outside in the hallway, James paced back and forth until he wore down the tiles, his eyes fixed on the red in-surgery light. Every time the door creaked open, his heart would seize, fearing bad news. The grandfather, seated, fingered the beads of a rosary, praying ceaselessly. The space was plunged into a terrifying silence, broken only by the sound of nervous footsteps and heavy sighs. Inside the operating room, the battle for life was fierce. My blood continued to flow. My blood pressure dropped to alarming levels. The doctors transfused blood continuously, performing the C-section while trying to stop the uterine hemorrhage. There were moments when my heart flatlined on the monitor, leaving the entire team breathless. But then, thanks to the superhuman effort of the doctors and a mother's fierce will to live, I managed to pull back from the brink of death. Wah, wah. A baby's cry broke the tense atmosphere. A first cry, followed by a second, strong and clear, echoing throughout the operating room. It was 2 boys, both of them safe. The head nurse's cry of joy was like a heavenly melody that dispelled all the dark clouds. I lay there, still unconscious, but a faint smile seemed to appear on my lips. My children had come into this world, strong and resilient like their mother. The operating room door swung open. A nurse came out pushing 2 incubators. James rushed towards them. His trembling legs almost made him fall. He looked inside. 2 tiny red creatures, small as kittens, were curled up, still with remnants of blood and vernix. Their eyes were closed, their small mouths were half open, breathing rhythmically. Were these his children, the children he had doubted, whom he had wanted to reject? James brought his large, rough hand close and gently touched the cold glass. He didn't dare to touch them, afraid of hurting them. Tears streamed from his eyes, uncontrolled, undisguised. He wept openly, a cry of regret, of overwhelming joy, and of infinite gratitude. "My sons, I'm Dad. I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. He looked at the 2 babies and then towards the recovery room, where I was still in a coma. A knot of pain formed in his throat. The grandfather stood up with his cane and shakily approached to see his great-grandsons. He smiled, a toothless but radiant smile. The wrinkles on his face seemed to soften. "Good, very good. The Sinclair family is fortunate. Our ancestors are watching over us." He grabbed James's hand. His voice was stern but affectionate. "You see, grandson, this is your blood, and that is the woman who risked her life for you. From now on, if you ever make that mother and her children suffer again, I will not forgive you." James nodded repeatedly. The tears continued to fall. He looked at his sons and then at the closed door of the recovery room. He knew the battle for life was over, but the battle to win back my heart, to amend his mistakes, was just beginning. And this time, he would fight with all his heart, with sincerity, not with money or power. The nurse took the babies to the neonatal intensive care unit. James didn't follow. He stood in front of the recovery room door, patiently waiting for me to wake up. He wanted to be the first person I saw when I opened my eyes. He wanted to tell me the thank you and I'm sorry that he owed me for so long. The lonely, repentant silhouette of that man was cast on the hospital hallway, marking the complete transformation of a person after the greatest setback of his life. The calm in the hospital was temporary, but the real storm was raging outside. As soon as he knew my children and I were out of danger, the grandfather ordered a full-scale investigation. With decades of experience in business, he didn't believe my poisoning was a coincidence. He had the private clinic where I had my checkups cordoned off, requested the security camera recordings, and analyzed all the medication samples. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. The pharmacy's security camera had recorded a nurse secretly switching my pill bottle while her colleagues weren't looking. The grandfather's people quickly located the nurse and took her to a discreet location to talk. Faced with pressure and irrefutable evidence, she confessed everything. Who was behind it, who transferred her the money, and the cruel purpose of her actions. At the same time, in James's mansion, Sophia was pacing nervously, waiting for news. She was convinced that with that dose, I would miscarry or even die. But the news she received was not of my misfortune, but the sound of police sirens outside her door. The gate opened and 2 police officers entered, followed by James's assistant with a frigid expression. Sophia turned pale. She tried to run upstairs, but her trembling legs wouldn't respond. They read her an arrest warrant for aggravated assault and attempted murder. As the cold handcuffs closed around her wrists, Sophia screamed, "You can't arrest me. I'm the fiancée of CEO James Sinclair. He won't allow it." James's assistant approached and looked at her with contempt. "Miss Sophia, wake up." It was Mr. Sinclair himself who provided the police with additional evidence of your financial fraud. You not only attempted to cause harm, but you also embezzled company funds during your time there. Prepare to spend a long time in prison. Sophia was stunned. Her eyes widened in desperation. She never imagined that the man she had tried so hard to win over would be the one to send her to prison. They took her away, humiliated, leaving behind her broken dream of luxury and power. Beatrice witnessed everything from upstairs. Her face was ashen. She staggered, clutching the railing in disbelief. The perfect daughter-in-law, the sweet and obedient girl she had praised so much, turned out to be a venomous snake, a cold-blooded killer. She remembered the times she had mistreated me, the times she had defended Sophia, and a chill ran down her spine. She had almost been an indirect accomplice to the death of her own grandchildren. That afternoon, James returned home to pick up some things to take to me at the hospital. He saw his mother sitting in the living room, looking lost, but he walked past her without a word, as if she were a stranger. Beatrice called out to him, her voice trembling. "James, how is Eleanor and my grandchildren?" James stopped and turned to look at his mother with empty, tired eyes. "Eleanor hasn't woken up yet. The children are in the incubator." "Why do you ask, Mom? Wasn't it your wish to get rid of her? Didn't you say she was a fruitless tree?" Each of James's questions was a slap to Beatrice. She broke down in tears. "I was wrong. That hussy deceived me. I want to see my grandchildren." James shook his head. His voice was firm. "There's no need, Mom. Your presence now would only upset Eleanor more. You nearly killed your own grandchildren with your foolishness and greed. It's best you stay in this house and repent." With that, James picked up the bag and left the house, leaving his elderly mother submerged in a late remorse. The huge, luxurious mansion now felt colder and emptier than ever, like the souls of those who lived in it. The truth had come to light, evil had been punished, but the wounds of the heart it left, when would they heal? The detention center door closed behind Sophia, taking with it her youth and her delusions of a luxurious life for which she had unscrupulously fought. I lay in the hospital bed, listening to Michael's account over the phone, my heart unmoved. Sophia was charged with aggravated assault, and with the evidence of financial fraud and embezzlement that James himself had provided, her sentence would be severe. The law of karma, sooner or later, always comes. He who sows the wind reaps the whirlwind. He who uses cruelty to harm others ends up digging his own grave. James sat beside me, his face visibly gaunt after several sleepless nights. He said nothing about Sophia or the storm outside. He just focused on peeling and cutting small pieces of apple. His silence conveyed the weight of his regret, but I knew that there are wounds that, even when bandaged, leave scars that ache in bad weather. That afternoon, a familiar cry was heard in the hallway. I frowned, about to turn away, when James got up and quickly went out. Through the glass, I saw Beatrice, laden with lunch containers and bags, her elderly face bathed in tears. She was trying to enter, but the bodyguards and James blocked her. "I'm sorry, James. Let me see my grandchildren. I know I was wrong. I made chicken soup for Eleanor. Let me see them just for a moment." James stood in her way. His broad back, which I once leaned on, now radiated a cold distance. He said in a low but firm voice, "Go home, Mom. I've already told you, your presence now is not helpful." "You want to see your grandchildren? Did you think about this day when you threw my wife and children out on the street? When you said Eleanor was a fruitless tree?" Beatrice stopped. Her trembling hand let go of the lunch container. Tears of late remorse rolled down her wrinkled cheeks, but they couldn't erase the harm she had caused us. James continued, "You almost killed your own grandchildren with your ignorance. If you truly love us, leave Eleanor in peace. Don't force me to commit the disrespect of banning you from here forever." Seeing Beatrice's lonely, pathetic figure walk away, my heart tightened. The woman who had spent her life among calculations and cruelty finally received the coldness of her only son. I felt no satisfaction, only sadness for a life that didn't know how to value what it had. James returned to the room and looked at me with regret. He didn't know I had heard everything, and in my heart, the invisible wall that separated me from the Sinclair family had grown a little higher. 3 days after the surgery that almost cost me my life, I was finally conscious enough to feel the pain of the long incision on my abdomen. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emptiness in my soul. I lay there, staring at the white ceiling, surrounded by the monotonous beeping of machines. James was still by my side, meticulously caring for me. He washed my face, fed me puree, helped me take my first steps. James helped me sit up, placing more pillows behind my back. He brought me a bowl of hot soup, blew on it gently, and brought it to my mouth. I looked at him, observed this strange tenderness, and couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness. If this attention had come earlier, when I was the silent wife in the kitchen, perhaps my life would have been different. I turned my face away. My voice was hoarse. "I can eat by myself. Just leave it there." James paused, the spoon suspended in midair. He looked down. A shadow of sadness crossed his face, but he didn't insist. He placed the bowl on the table and said softly, "You're still weak. Don't push yourself. The babies are still in the incubator, but thank God their vitals are improving. The doctor says they can be with their mother in a week." Hearing about my children, my heart softened. I turned to James. My gaze was less harsh but maintained a safe distance. I pronounced each word clearly. "Thank you. Thank you for saving us. I'll pay you back for the hospital and surgery costs later." James waved his hands hastily. His voice was anxious. "What are you saying, Eleanor? They are my children. You are my wife. Taking care of you is my responsibility. It's what I should do. Don't be so calculating with me. It hurts." I looked him straight in the eye and smiled faintly. "Wife? We're divorced. Have you forgotten so quickly? You gave me that paper. I signed it. Now, between us, there is only one relationship. We are the parents of 2 children. You are the biological father. I am the mother. You can visit the children, pay child support, but don't ever think about getting back together. A broken mirror, even if glued, will always have cracks." James stared at me. The pain was evident in his deep eyes. He wanted to come closer, take my hand, hug me, but my determined gaze acted as a barrier. In the end, he could only nod with a twisted, bitter smile. "I understand. I won't force you. Just let me be close to take care of the children, to see you every day. That's enough for me." Silence fell over the room, a heavy silence filled with remorse. James sat there, slumped in his chair, looking strangely lonely. I closed my eyes, holding back tears. I knew I was being cruel, but that cruelty was necessary to protect my heart from further harm. The distance between us was no longer physical, but a chasm of emotional wounds that could not be erased. 2 weeks later, my children and I were discharged. Instead of going to my parents' house or hiring help, I decided to take care of them myself in the apartment. I wanted to do everything with my own hands, as if to make up for the days they spent alone in the incubator. But taking care of 1 newborn is already difficult, let alone 2 premature ones. Everything was chaos. James, as the biological father, made full use of his visitation rights. Every morning he would arrive early, laden with nutritious food, and move around the house like an expert nanny. From a CEO used to signing $1 million documents, he was now clumsily changing diapers and holding bottles with inexperienced hands. One time, while I, exhausted, was trying to get the older one to sleep, the younger one woke up crying with hunger. James rushed to prepare the bottle but shook it so hard that milk splattered all over his expensive suit, leaving his face dusted with white powder. The scene made me feel a mixture of irritation and amusement. I tried to get up to do it myself, but he insisted. "Rest, I've got this. I saw it on the internet. It's easy." The result was that 5 minutes later, the baby baptized him with a stream of urine that soaked his shirt. James stood petrified with the child in his arms, not knowing what to do. The baby giggled, while the CEO father had an expression of total defeat. "Well, what a welcome gift, my son. A bit salty, don't you think?" I watched him from the bed as he clumsily cleaned up the mess, and an indescribable emotion arose in me. This man, who previously wouldn't even wash a plate, was now willing to get dirty and exhausted for his children. His persistence and shamelessness were making my defenses crumble. My voice sounded less cold. "Go get changed, you stink. And don't come tomorrow. I can manage on my own." James looked up and smiled. "It's okay. I brought a change of clothes. I'm not leaving tonight. I'll sleep on the sofa and take care of the babies, so you can rest. Look at you, you have raccoon eyes." With that, he started washing a towel, indirectly ignoring my hint. I watched his broad back hunched over the sink, and suddenly I felt a strange peace. That night, I woke up thirsty. When I went into the living room, I saw James asleep on the sofa, one hand still on the children's crib, the other holding a bottle. The dim nightlight illuminated his tired but serene face. I watched him in silence for a while, wondering if people could really change for love, or if this was just a fleeting remorse. Whatever the answer, at least in that moment, I no longer felt alone in the tough battle of raising my children. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, the boys turned 6 months old. From tiny, red creatures, my 2 princes were now chubby, fair-skinned babies with dark eyes identical to their father's. The older one was named Leo. He was calm and smiley. The younger one, Hugo, was a little tornado, always rolling and moving. My small home was always filled with laughter and babbling. James continued to play his role as a part-time father. He didn't miss any important milestones. The day Leo learned to roll over, he shouted with joy and video called his entire office to show off. The day Hugo got his first tooth, he bought a huge cake to celebrate, even though the baby only drank milk. His presence in the house became so natural that sometimes I forgot we were divorced. One afternoon, while I was preparing baby food, I heard the sound of drills in the apartment next door. I remembered it had been empty since the incident where James bought the entire floor to keep me. Curious, I opened the door and saw workers moving in furniture, and directing the operation was, of course, James, covered in dust and with a blueprint in hand. Seeing me, he grinned from ear to ear and pointed to the open door. "Hello, neighbor. I just bought this place. I'm going to knock down the wall to make a connecting door to yours for more convenience. From now on, I'm moving in here. If you feel unwell at night or need anything, you just have to shout, and I'll come running." I stood frozen, not knowing whether to laugh or cry at his audacity. I crossed my arms and raised an eyebrow. What new trick is this? The CEO of a corporation leaving a multi-million-dollar mansion to live in a small apartment. Aren't you afraid people will laugh at you? James came closer. His gaze was so tender and sincere that my heart skipped a beat. He whispered, "A huge mansion without my wife and children is just an empty house. Eleanor, this place is small, but my children's laughter is here. You're here. I don't need appearances. I just need to be near you. I promise not to disturb your private life. I just want to be a good neighbor, a good father." The sincerity in his words disarmed me. I sighed, turned, and went back inside, leaving a sentence hanging in the air. "As you wish, but don't make noise. If my children wake up because of your drilling, you'll have to deal with me." James laughed behind me. "At your command, boss." "Oh, sorry. At your command, neighbor." From that day on, my life had a very special neighbor. He didn't demand my forgiveness. He didn't pressure me to come back. He just quietly took care of me, protected me. Every morning, a bag with breakfast hung on my door. Every night, if a baby cried, he would run over, half asleep, to rock him. The distance between our apartments was just a wall, but the distance in my heart seemed to be slowly filling up with his persistence. New York, in the middle of storm season, the sky always gray and heavy with water. That night, a severe storm hit the city. The wind howled through the windows like a wild beast. I was sleeping when I was awakened by Leo's sharp cry. I touched his forehead and panicked. He was burning like a coal. The thermometer read 103 degrees. I put cold cloths on him and an anti-fever patch, but the fever didn't break, and he started having convulsions. Trembling, I tried to call the doctor, but there was no signal. I looked out the window. It was pouring. The streets were flooded. I hugged my son. Tears streamed down my cheeks. At that moment, the connecting door burst open. James rushed in, still in his pajamas, disheveled. "What's wrong, Eleanor?" I heard Leo crying in a strange way. Seeing my panic, he didn't ask further. He touched his forehead. His face changed. "He has a very high fever. We need to get him to the hospital now. It's dangerous." He grabbed a blanket, wrapped Leo in it, lifted him in one arm, and grabbed me with the other. "Come on. My car is high. We can get through." We ran to the garage, but it was flooded. The water covered more than half the wheels. The car wouldn't start. No taxi dared to go out in this weather. James looked at our son, weakening in his arms. A fierce determination shone in his eyes. He shouted over the sound of the rain. "We can't wait. The hospital is a mile away. I'll carry him. You take the umbrella and hold on tight to me." And he plunged into the storm. The water was up to his knees. The current carried debris and branches. James gritted his teeth and moved forward with a firm step, his broad back protecting the small creature. I ran behind, shielding them with the umbrella. My tears mixed with the salty rain. The road to the hospital never seemed so long and dangerous. In some parts, the water was so deep that James had to feel the ground to avoid falling into a manhole. Suddenly, he stumbled, stepping on something sharp. He groaned in pain, staggered, but his arms never let go of our son. I was alarmed. "James, are you okay?" He gritted his teeth, sweat and rain running down his face. "I'm fine. We're almost there. Hang on, son." He didn't stop to look at his wound. He kept going, limping, leaving a reddish trail in the water. Seeing his hunched back in the storm, protecting our son with his own body, my heart of ice finally melted. When the emergency room lights appeared, James was almost out of strength. He handed our son to the doctors and collapsed into a chair, pale and breathless. I looked at his foot. Blood was gushing from a long cut on the sole, staining the white floor red. In that moment, I realized that this man was no longer the arrogant CEO who used money for everything. Now he was simply a father willing to give his own blood for his son's safety. The doctor told us that Leo had an acute virus, but thanks to arriving in time, the fever had come down and there were no after effects. We both sighed in relief, as if a weight had been lifted from us. Leo had to stay for observation that night. James insisted I go home with Hugo, but I refused. How could I leave peacefully, seeing him limp with a bandaged foot? At dawn, Leo was sleeping soundly. The room was quiet. James had fallen asleep in a chair by the bed, his head leaning against the wall. I went over and put a blanket on him. The nightlight illuminated his angular face, revealing the lines around his eyes and the sweat on his forehead. This man had aged. His former splendor had given way to the weathered, worried look of a father. I sat across from him and watched him. The hatred and resentment that had consumed me for months seemed to have washed away with the storm. I wondered if, without this event, I would have ever seen this real, selfless James. Suddenly, James stirred, frowning as if having a nightmare. He muttered broken words. "Eleanor, don't go. I was wrong. Don't leave me." His voice was a whisper, but it echoed in the silence, sinking deep into my soul. Even in his dreams, the fear of losing us tormented him. I reached out to touch his cheek but pulled my hand back. At that moment, he woke up with a start. Seeing me, he sat up straight, embarrassed, and wiped the corner of his mouth. I fell asleep. "Did he get a fever again? Are you hungry? I'll go to the cafeteria to get something to eat." I shook my head and looked at his bandaged foot. My voice was softer than ever. "Does your foot hurt a lot?" The doctor said the wound was deep. They had to give you several stitches. He waved his hand. "It's nothing. As long as the boy is okay, I'm happy." He looked at me with an oceanic depth and tenderness. "Eleanor, thank you. Thank you for giving me the chance to be a father, to make amends for my mistakes. I know the wound I caused you is too deep. I don't dare ask for your forgiveness now, but please don't push me away anymore. Let me take care of the three of you, whether as a neighbor, a father, or the man trying to win you back from scratch." I looked into his eyes. I saw no calculation or arrogance, only raw sincerity. I sighed, got up, and went to him, adjusting the blanket. I said quietly, but loud enough for him to hear, "Rest and don't talk nonsense. If you want to win me back, you need to be healthy. Limping like that, you won't catch anyone." James froze for a second, then his face lit up with immense joy. He took my hand and squeezed it tightly, as if afraid it would disappear. "I promise I'll recover very quickly. Thank you, Eleanor." I didn't pull my hand away. I left it in his. Outside, the storm had passed. The first rays of sun peeked through the leaves, heralding a new, more peaceful beginning. And so, without us realizing it, my two princes turned one. For their first birthday, I didn't throw a lavish party at a restaurant, but an intimate celebration in our apartment. The guests were just Grandpa, Uncle Michael, a few close friends, and of course, the annoying neighbor next door. The house was decorated in shades of blue. Leo and Hugo, dressed in little suits and bow ties, looked like little gentlemen. They crawled on the floor, fighting over a microphone and a laptop on a tray of objects to choose their future profession, making the whole family laugh. Grandpa was crying with laughter, hugging his great-grandsons and inhaling their sweet, milky scent. When the party ended and the guests left, it was just James and me, cleaning up the mess. Suddenly, James dimmed the lights, leaving only the flickering candles on the cake. He took me to the balcony, where the wind blew fresh. He didn't kneel like in the movies, nor did he pull out a diamond ring. From his pocket, he took out a thick folder and placed it in my hands. I frowned. What is this now? A custody contract? A property agreement? I've already told you, I don't need your money. James shook his head. His gaze was serious and tender. It's not money or a contract. These are the transfer papers for all my assets to your name and the children's. It's all notarized. I was stunned. My hands trembled as I held the documents. Are you crazy? This is the entire Sinclair fortune. If you give it all to me, what will you have left? James smiled, a light smile like a cloud. I have these two hands and this mind left. Before, I used money to buy peace of mind and contracts to tie you down, and I lost everything. Now I want to bet again, but with sincerity. I'm giving you all my assets, which means I have nothing. From now on, I'll be your employee, a man with nothing but his love for you and our children. He took my hands. His voice was warm and deep. Eleanor, I'm not proposing with a ring, because rings can be taken off. I'm proposing with my absolute trust. I want us to start over, not for the children, not out of responsibility, but because I truly need you. Would you dare to accept this man with nothing and give him a home to take shelter in? I looked at the man before me. I looked deep into his eyes. I remembered the sleepless nights caring for our sick child, his back carrying our son through the storm, the puree he clumsily cooked when I was tired. Money, status, it was all superficial. What keeps a woman is not $5 million or a mansion, but the security of being loved and valued. I smiled gently. Tears of happiness rolled down my cheeks. I didn't say yes or I love you. I simply rested my head on his shoulder and whispered, "If you have nothing left, then starting tomorrow, you wake up early to prepare bottles and change diapers to start paying your debt. The interest is calculated daily." James hugged me tightly. His happy laughter echoed under the starry sky. No grand words were needed. A tight hug was enough to mend all the fractures of the past. 3 years later, on a weekend in Central Park, full of green shadows and laughter, I sat on the grass, watching 3 figures playing with a kite in the distance. Leo and Hugo were already 4 years old, running and jumping like little birds. James was the same, always busy, sweating as he held the kite string, shouting encouragement louder than the children themselves. Seeing that scene, my heart filled with an immense peace. The past 3 years had been a long journey of healing and rebuilding trust. We didn't get married again. For me, a piece of paper or a lavish wedding was no longer important. What was important was waking up every morning and seeing him in the kitchen making breakfast, coming home at night and hearing my children's laughter and my husband's question, "Are you tired today?" I used those $5 million to open a chain of organic food stores. The business prospered, giving me complete financial independence. I was no longer the wife confined to the kitchen asking for money. Now I was his partner, his equal. James, after delegating some of his power at the company, dedicated most of his time to the family. People said I had him wrapped around my finger, but he just laughed and said I was his wife and could do whatever I wanted, that I wasn't the neighbor's wife. The afternoon wind blew gently. James brought the children running towards me. The three of them were flushed and smiling. Leo curled up in my lap. "Mom, Dad is a kite champion. It flies all the way to the clouds." Hugo drank some water and asked his father for a kiss. James sat beside me, wiped his sweat, and rested his head on my shoulder. "I'm so tired, honey, but so happy. What do you think of how I'm training my two disciples? They're going to be heartbreakers when they grow up." I gave his nose a gentle pinch. "You only talk nonsense. Instead of teaching them useful things, you teach them to be mischievous." He took my hand, intertwining our fingers tightly. We sat like that in silence, watching the sunset paint the sky purple. The painful past, the misunderstandings, the hatred, the lies, it had all been left behind, leaving only this serene present. I suddenly realized that happiness is sometimes not a perfect destination. Happiness is that after so many storms, we still find each other, still willing to forgive and to continue walking hand in hand. Yesterday's scars are now valuable lessons that remind us to appreciate what we have. "Let's go, Eleanor. Grandma is waiting for us for dinner," James reminded me softly. Beatrice had aged a lot. After the past events, her character had completely changed. She became a vegetarian, prayed, and only wished to see her children and grandchildren. I nodded, stood up, and brushed off my clothes. The four of us, hand in hand, walked towards the parking lot. Our shadows stretched long on the green grass. Life is long and unpredictable. But I believe that as long as there is goodness in the heart, as long as we know how to let go and love, no matter how many difficulties we go through, the final destination will always be peace. Like after a downpour, the sky clears, and the rainbow shines again.